Welcome to Fangirl Football. I'm Judy.
I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Lauren.
Welcome back to Fangirl Football's Thursday Night Focus, where we discuss the upcoming game, build a fantasy sports EVO lineup, and a FanDuel lineup. We have an exciting Thursday night game this week of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Atlanta Falcons, which means the Falcons are getting a third home game in a row. Probably a benefit with it being a short week, though Tampa doesn't have far to travel either. I swear if this was in high school, it'd be one of those where everyone gets on the bus at 6 a.m. and they just drive it the same day instead of traveling early. But I'm sure with NFL, they go at least a day before.
Yeah, I'm guessing they fly too. I don't know. I mean, it's not that far, and sometimes it's easier to just drive than fly in those situations.
Hey, it's team bonding. Throw everyone in a bus and spend a couple hours together.
Yeah, you're either in a bus or you're going to spend it, at an airport. So take your pick. They probably, have things a little streamlined. But anyhow, Atlanta is currently favored in this game, much to my surprise, with an over-under of 44 points. And the Falcons are favored by 1.5 points. So it's not much of being favored, but still, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have looked really good, and they're at 3-1, and the Falcons are at 2-2. So this surprises me for sure, these lines. We'll see, if it pans out that way. I don't like all of the numbers that I'm seeing from Vegas and on the player projections this week. They kind of baffle me a little bit. Let's look at how the teams did last week before we get into those projection totals. Last week, the Buccaneers were angry from losing the prior week to the Broncos, and they crushed Philadelphia 33-16. Baker Mayfield had 47 pass attempts, which is really surprising to me considering they were never behind in that entire game. So why they kept throwing is kind of a surprise. Baker passed for 2 touchdowns. He ran for another. He racked up 31 fantasy points. He had a great day. The whole team had a great day. Mike Evans led in targets last week with 14, and Chris Godwin had 9 targets. But surprisingly, their tight end, Cade Otton, also had 9 targets. So they're starting to bring Cade Otton a lot more into the mix there.
I think I heard that it was 108 at times on the field in Tampa. So the Eagles just probably weren't ready for that kind of heat. I couldn't imagine playing in that.
I did not realize it was that hot last weekend. And the Falcons, how did they look? So they squeaked out a win over New Orleans with the last-second field goal. You were excited about that, weren't you, Lauren?
I was very excited. I was surprising the dogs with some of my cheering.
Fantasy-wise, this was a big turd for the Falcons. Somehow, Kirk Cousins managed to have 35 pass attempts and less than 9 fantasy points. I don't even know how you manage that, but he did. On the entire team, no one had over 10 fantasy points.
Except the kicker and the defense.
I did forget that. So I guess when your kicker and your defense deliver, then all of your other players just, have a seat and don't have to perform anything. If we look at like the whole season for these two teams and fantasy production, it's Baker Mayfield, Chris Godwin's, Mike Evans, Baker Mayfield. That's your top 6 stat lines there. It is all Tampa Bay, and they've got some pretty big totals. Baker Mayfield in week 4 was 31.8 points. In week 1, he was 29.6. In week 2, he was 19.8. The only week that he wasn't high scoring was their loss to the Denver Broncos. So we're going to see, which Baker Mayfield do we get on Thursday night. But most of the time we're seeing a pretty good Baker Mayfield.
I definitely think we're seeing a stronger Baker Mayfield than the Denver Broncos game 1 for this upcoming Thursday night.
Yeah, I would expect so. I don't know what happened to him in that Broncos game, but they just weren't on that game. But every other week, they've shown up. If we move on to the fantasy projections, they're quite strange to me. So They are projecting that Kirk Cousins is going to be the top fantasy scorer for both of these teams with the top FanDuel projections of 15.29 points. And Baker is second with 15.2 points. So he's not far off, but I'm still really surprised at those projections. They just don't make sense to me. How is Kirk Cousins projected to be the top fantasy producer in this game?
Along with Robinson in the top
Yeah.
3. We haven't seen the production that we all kind of expected him to have this year.
Yeah.
I don't know where they're getting 14
B-
points for him.
I have no idea. Bijan Robinson is projected higher than he has even produced any week this year. So they think this is Bijan's game. This is the game that we get to see Bijan Robinson step up. And I believe he popped up on the injury report yesterday with a hamstring injury. So maybe they're not taking that into account. Bijan Robinson is projected higher than Saquon Barkley scored against Tampa Bay last week. I don't know about you, but I don't think Bijan is anywhere near Saquon Barkley's level and does not play in as good a line as Barkley has. So the Bucs stopped him. I don't understand these projections.
You can't even really make the argument that, oh, they're at home, they're going to do well because they're at home, because they've been home the last 2 games. And we haven't seen this level of production from them.
Yeah, we haven't seen it. So they're projecting something that hasn't happened, and maybe somebody knows something that we don't, but I'm not going to base my lineup building on these projections because they just don't seem right.
Not at all. I'm trying to also look at it. They put Bijan Robinson above Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And I was trying to look at the Chris Godwin's and Evans numbers for the last couple of weeks. And I feel like they're way underrating those two.
I
Because
agree.
week 4, Evans was almost 20 FanDuel points, and they're saying he's going to do 11.
Yeah. And each week we've had either Mike Evans or Chris Godwin show up on at about 20 points. So how they are projecting just both of them to have an awful game is amazing to me. Should we look into how we want to create a lineup, or are we ready for that?
I think we need to pick who we think is going to win first.
Okay. I'm going Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
I can see that. I definitely understand where you're coming from there. I could probably be swayed that way, but I'm going to go Falcons. I'm going to say the Falcons are going to win this one.
I feel
Maybe
like
get
you're
another
just
20 kicker points again.
I feel like you're just, betting with your team alliance here and not really, thinking about this whole situation.
Yes, that is a true statement.
All right, well, let's
I
move
will own that.
over and build what we think is going to happen on our fantasy sports Evo lineup, where we're picking teams and not players. So this is our Fangirl Football Thursday night contest. We have to decide who's going to have more passing yards, more receptions, more rushing yards, and kicking. I'll give you the kicker. So we'll just go straight to kicker, and I'll put in Atlanta. You get kicks.
Perfect.
Can I just put Tampa Bay for everything else now, or should we actually think through it?
We should think through it. I think passing touchdowns, we can go with Tampa.
All right. Passing yards, Tampa. We can look back at, Kirk Cousins' best week is about even with Baker Mayfield's worst week.
Oh, that's right. Baker Mayfield passed for 350 yards almost in week 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll go with Tampa.
Okay. How about
number of receptions?
I would go Tampa.
We just
as
haven't
well.
seen Kirk Cousins connect, so I got to still stick with Tampa for even receptions and them being able to catch the ball.
And rushing touchdowns. I think we might see more Algier for the Falcons than Bijan, but still. What do you think on rushing touchdowns?
We'll go Atlanta.
Rushing yards?
I think Tampa's still going to rush for more yards.
Have you talked yourself into
that it's going to be in the same way that last week was on kicking and defense and everything. I think we're going to see something similar again from Atlanta, where maybe it's not quite the offense winning the game.
The defense and the
They'll get a
kicker have
couple
to
of
do it?
points.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll submit that. I might go back in and change that rushing touchdowns. We'll see. So let's move over to FanDuel and our FanDuel contest and see what we can decide here. I feel like, again, when I look at this on paper, Tampa Bay is so much stronger than Atlanta. But I could have said the same thing, I feel like, in New Orleans last week. And New Orleans still managed to lose that game because of the Falcons kicker. Anyhow, if I'm picking players here, we can see, Bijan's questionable with that hamstring injury, and Mike Evans is questionable as well, although I'm pretty sure he practiced. So think I want Baker Mayfield in my captain spot. How do you feel? Think we can afford him?
I like it. Yeah. I think we can afford them.
And then we've got to pair him with Chris Godwin. We
Mhm.
might save some money if we went down. Let's go with Tyler Algier. What do you for the Falcons? You think we can save some money and go Algier, assuming that either one, Bijan isn't going to play, or two, Bijan is going to be ineffective like he has been most of the season?
Either Algier or how much is Mooney?
Be up here a little bit. Nope. Where is Mooney? Oh, Mooney is less than Algier at 8,000.
That might be another good option since we saw him increasing in number of catches,
As long as you don't ask
number
me
of
to go
receptions.
Kyle Pitts or Bijan, because I am not doing either of those anymore, especially after Kyle Pitts delivered that goose egg last week. But this is actually a good time to argue that he's going to go back to average and that we should put Kyle Pitts in here.
I'd
What are the odds
agree.
of him doing a goose egg twice in a row? And I feel like they're going to be behind. You don't want to risk it?
They were behind last week too at points, and they still didn't target him. And it's not. I feel
Well,
like Atlanta is going to look at last week and be like, "Hey, what worked last week? Let's do that again."
they targeted him. He just couldn't catch the ball, which made
So then
them
it's on
stop
both
targeting
sides.
him.
Yeah.
So, but I feel like if we're just playing the odds, we'd go back to Kyle Pitts there. Um, who else do you like? Ooh, Trey Palmer's got a concussion. He's gonna almost certain to not play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm pretty sure he had a touchdown last week down though. Because we can afford pretty much anyone we want. Let's go back up to the
I
top
mean, I
and
don't
not
think
take
you're gonna like my answer.
who. You want Kirk Cousins?
No. I think we should put Koo.
All right. We can do that.
This is the team that I think playing the kicker is not a terrible idea. Mostly because for weeks now they've been playing from behind and they've been asking him to kick a lot and kick his longest. Last week was his longest field goal ever at home.
So you're assuming that this is a game and the Falcons are in it, and that
Yes.
3 points is something rather than them trying to pass and catch up. I guess we're just going on this as a close game then and picking close players because of Daryl Mooney. Um, it's hard to go Mike Evans and Chris Godwin's. We can actually afford it, and if he is healthy enough, it's probably a good play because their third wide receiver does have that concussion. So I do like that. We're basically out on the whole running game on both sides here, which doesn't align with we're assuming that this is a close game. Then we would be wanting to bring in that running game some more.
What about Bucky Irving?
I like
I thought he
Bucky
was on the
Irving.
injury list last week.
He played. He was fine. And he doesn't have a questionable tag next to him. We could definitely go Bucky Irving. We can even afford Rashad White. We can afford pretty much anyone we want. But if we want to bring in the running game, let's go Bucky Irving. Yeah, we
Over
still
Mike
have
Evans.
4,000 left. So
Yeah.
you can
Do we just
build a lot
upgrade
in
to
here.
Mike Evans?
Nah, I like picking Godwin over Evans in this matchup. And I don't feel like they're both going to be having a great game. I feel like the Falcons will cover one of them, and I'd rather go with Chris Godwin. So we're going to assume they get off to a big lead and then they're running out the clock with Bucky Irving and Falcons are just kicking field goals.
Will
All
Baker
right.
Mayfield throw any interceptions?
I don't think so. I don't love this lineup. It like has two different storylines, but I don't love this game as well. I would probably just be going all in on Tampa and then Mooney. So I don't know, but if it ends up being a close game, then Koo will get used. It's just not the storyline that we've kind of gone with Baker as our captain and Chris Godwin stacking them together. So it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I like the pieces. But you can pretty much afford whatever you want to do here, unless you're trying to get Bijan and Drake London. So I'm going to save it.
And that's our lineup.
Yep.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'd love to hear from you. Do you agree with us on these lineups? Leave us a comment and join our free Thursday night daily fantasy contest. You can find the links in the description. We can't wait to see you in the Fantasy Sports EVO and the FanDuel contests.